Yes.
Sí.
Tranquila, la flor.
All right, you guys ready to get going? Yeah, perfect. All right, so we upgraded. Congratulations. It's going to make learning way easier, right? Something like that. All right, so last class we started getting into logic functions. We're going to kind of continue that. I'm going to go through a couple examples from the book on if functions, mainly because I want to get into nested if statements, and they're easier to just look at the book than to think up. And then we'll get into a couple other logic functions, mainly around conditional functions, and then reference functions, reference functions will actually be like using a secondary table to look up something in a primary table and do some analysis. So that's what we're going to try to cover today. Are there any questions or anything that I can answer, address before I get started? Has anybody started this homework? The reference function stuff? Yeah. Finished it? Yeah. You got stuck? Yeah, I'm going to spend today and then probably on Monday, like actually spend a bunch of time going through the homework. I'd say this is the hardest. I think this is the hardest section of the course. So if it's a little bit of a struggle, that's okay. If it's a lot of bit of a struggle, I'm not doing my job, which is a problem, but yeah, we'll get through it. No questions? All good? Yes? Goodish? Okay. Okay, so if you want to follow along, which would be great, I'm gonna go to the book, My Educator, and I'm gonna go to the 3.2 practice problems here and go through a few of these. So if you want to follow along, that would be helpful. Bring up our task guide here. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So we've got a table of this kind of looks like, wait, what am I doing here? Doesn't this, did we already do this one? What am I doing? Is it the same one?
Oh, it seems like the same.
It's not supposed to be the same one. What did I do? All right, we did Boolean function last time, right? They might just be doing the same thing, but just doing it with an if statement instead of a Boolean. Can't remember. Yeah, okay. So we're just doing it with if statements. All right, sorry about that. So we'll go back into the if function. All right, so there we go. All right. So we're basically doing the same thing. We've got a similar data set, but I want to use if functions versus Booleans. If you remember, like Booleans give us a true false. If statements don't give us a true false, we're going to write the outcome logic ourselves. So they do a very similar thing. If functions are just a little more complex than the Boolean functions. So we want to calculate if our payment is okay using if function that returns yes, if the income ratio is below 43% and no otherwise. So maybe I'll just, as a refresher, does anybody remember what we do here if this was a Boolean? By any chance? Any idea which function we would use if we were going to use a Boolean function here? Give me a guess. And. Perfect. All right. So we're gonna, if I used an and, I would type and, right? And then I've got my logical statement 1, and I want to make sure that it returns yes, or let's say true, if the payment income ratio, which is column E. Can you guys see this over here, by the way? Yeah, we're good? Okay. Okay, so the payment income ratio, which is column E, is below 43%. And no otherwise. So anybody got a guess what I would type in to check that using an and function? Again, I want to check if the payment income ratio, which is column E, is less than 43%. You need me to blow it up? I'll blow it up. Here, give me a minute. Is that better? Okay. Okay, so again, I'm using my and function. So column E, less than 43%. Who's got an idea? What am I typing in here? 12.
It's where?
It's below 43%. So I don't need, I'm only looking for that in this one, right? So that should be enough. That should give me a true since 37% is below 43%, right? So that's how I'd write it using a Boolean. So I'm using an and function. I'm using an and because an and is if everything's true, it's true. That's what I put in. So now I want to write the same thing using an if statement. So I'm going to start out writing, it's going to be the same logical test. So we're going to use payment income is less than 43%. Does anybody have an idea of what I should put in? So what should my value if true be? Yeah. Yes. All right. So we're going to put quotation marks because we want it to be text. Type in yes and our quotation. We got, and then we want it to be no otherwise. So my value of false is no, like that. And we get yes. And then obviously we can pull that down. It should update for everything. Is that clear? Did you use quotes? Do you have a comma? If you have a comma after E12, should be a less than symbol. Comma after E12 should be a less than. That's your logical.
It's still
That's the and function. We're doing. I changed from an and to an if.
Oh, we're doing it?
Yeah, I did and the first time, and then I just showed how we would do it with an if. Equals, that's it. 43%. Any questions on that? So we got that a Boolean and an if are very similar. An if is just a little broader. We can do more complex things with an if. All good? All right, so let's move on to the next one here. So we want to calculate score. Again, we're going to use an if function. Return yes if the credit score is greater than or equal to the threshold credit score. Otherwise, return no. All right, so similar thing. So we're going to use an if function. We're going to use our logical test. Can somebody tell me what my logical test should be here? So again, I'm looking at, I want to check if the credit score is greater than or equal to the threshold credit score. Okay, so C12. So why C12? Because that's our credit score. So we're going to take a look at our credit score. So if we're reading this right, we're saying return yes if the credit score. So I'm looking at my credit score column, which is C12, is greater than or equal to, and then what's my threshold credit score? My threshold credit score is F9. You just do, you just type it the way it's coming out of your mouth, greater than or equal to. Same way. If you do it reversed, it doesn't work. That's why I'm like, why I was being specific, but, okay, so that's our logic test. Our value, if true, is going to be yes. And oops. And our value of false is going to be no. I see a hand. You have a question? An absolute reference. Yeah, man, you're leading me, so it's perfect. All right, so what do you, so I was going to say, is this function correct? And it sounds like you're saying no. Okay, so what should this read? Okay, so before the 9, we're going to put a $sign, right? Because we're going to anchor that. Okay, so that's what we get. And then the reason we did that is so when we copy it down, each one of these is actually referencing. I have no idea why that happened. So that each one of these is referencing, continues to reference that the threshold credit score. So every single one is referencing that score. When I copied them down, that box didn't move. Right? All good? No confusion? Okay. I don't know where my task guide went. Let's see. Okay, so now let's take a look at the down. Okay, okay. So calculate down. Okay, if we're using an if function. So again, I'll start typing if, and it said if the down payment cell F12. So I'm gonna just assume cell F12 exceeds. So I'm just showing you how I would, I guess, turn the words into a function. So I'm seeing if down payment cell F12 exceeds, which is greater than 10% of the loan amount, which is going to be 0.1 times the loan amount, which it says is cell D12. Okay, so that's the first statement. Does that make sense? So what I wrote is if cell F12, if cell F12 exceeds 10% of cell D12, that's one statement. And then we've got an or. So it's saying, or if the down payment exceeds 5% of the loan amount and the payment income ratio is less than 40%. All right. So we've got like a bunch of different, we've got a few different tests here, right? So saying we're returning yes if the down payment exceeds 10% of the loan, or if the down payment exceeds 5% of the loan amount and the payment income ratio is less than 40%. So there's like a bunch of different terms that we're taking a look at. Does anybody have a thought on how we might tackle this type of problem? Close the parentheses just right where I'm at. So if I do this, nothing's gonna happen. Like I close the function, it's done, right? So I can't do that. Okay, so you're saying, could I start with an or? So start with an if. So start with what I had. So you're saying start with a F12 is greater than 0.1 times D12. Okay, now what? So I've got a logical statement written right here already. It says I've got it greater than. So that's already a logical statement. So if I put an equal sign, I've got a nonsensical statement. What do you guys think? I've got one logical statement.
We should add yes up to that statement. And then comma and adding books like you have 12 times.
Okay, so you're saying I should put a yes here? Why is that? Okay, so when we're reading this, you're saying if it's yes, if it exceeds, so if I meet this one logical function, so if I meet the fact that if F12 is greater than 10% of D12, it's automatically yes. So if the down payment exceeds 10% of the loan amount, it's a yes. Right? Because that's what it says. And then it says, or if the down payment exceeds 5% of the loan amount. So we've got a situation where we can do a nested if statement here where if it exceeds this, it's a yes. But if it doesn't, meaning if the value is false, we can put another logical statement and analyze that second set of conditions. Does that, who did I lose? Yeah? Okay. So when we're writing our if statement, after our if, we've got our logical test. We've got a comma, then we got our value if true, and then we've got a comma, and then our value if false. So the first thing we're testing, the first logical test is if the down payment is greater than 10% of the loan amount. Does that make sense so far? So if that's true, so my value if true is yes. All right. My value if false, so if this is not true, what I can do is do a second if statement that analyzes that or section where it says, or if the down payment exceeds 5% and the payment, the rest of all that stuff, I can put that in the value of false and do a second analysis. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. So we're going to put another comma and we'll put a second if statement. Maybe, I guess that maybe I'm being presumptuous here by putting an if statement, but now what I want to do is I want to analyze, it says, or if the down payment exceeds 5% of the loan amount and the payment to income ratio is less than 40%. So I've got those two conditions. Does anybody have a thought on how I would write that statement? Yeah.
And since you have two things that you do true, you have to put the function in the if function, for instance. So you have the if,
Huh?
and you have and.
So you think this would look like this?
And then S12.
So I've got down payment, which is F12. Okay. Let's look at D12. Okay. Okay.
Oh, the second one is just D12 less than 40.
Okay. Which is that, right? Okay, and that's my and. Okay. Okay. I'll stop you before we get too far. So, no, that's good. That's really good. I don't know if it's right or not. We'll look at it in a second, like from a fine-tooth comb detail standpoint. But someone tell me, like, why is this statement not quite correct? Anybody know? Is it something sticking out? Obviously, why that's not quite correct? Yeah. No, I'm just talking. I just want to look at actually the logical test part. Tell me why that logical test part isn't quite correct. It's like really close.
The middle part,
The no part? What do you mean?
like, shouldn't, like, if it's false, shouldn't it say no, like, you know what I'm saying?
I'm sort of following what you're saying, yes. Tell me, what's the logical test here? Nothing? Okay, we've got an and statement here, right? We've got two things. So the way an and statement vote works is if both those are true, it's true, right? Right now, is my logical test, am I testing whether that's true or false? So the output of this and statement right now, it's going to be either true or false. But what I need to do from a logical standpoint is I need to say, do I want it equal to true or do I want it equal to false? So what I want to do from a logical standpoint is I want to say equals true. And what that's doing is that's testing if that and statement is equal to true. So if that and statement is equal to true, I'll return the value of true, and if not, I'll return the value if false. Does that make sense? Yeah. So once again, I've got an and function in here that I'm doing some analysis on, that set of variables, and I'm checking whether it's equal to true. If it is equal to true, I'm going to go to the value of true, and if it's not, I'm going to go to the value of false. Okay. So in this case, the value of true is going to be, if it is, we wrote this so it's in the positive, right? So if it's true, it's going to be yes. And if it's false, it's going to be no, I believe. All right, sorry, I had a parenthesis that was missing some, oh, yeah. I had to close the initial if. So what we've got here, again, we've got our if statement. We've got our first logical test, which this is checking if the down payment, cell F12, exceeds 10% of the loan amount. If that's true, it's going to say yes. If it's not true, we're going to do a second logical test where we're seeing if the down payment exceeds 5% of the loan amount and the payment to income ratio is less than 40%. If both those things are true, it's yes. And if it's not, it's no. Does that make sense? Anybody have a problem with that? I'm sorry? It did. I screwed up and I forgot to close I forgot a parentheses at the end, but yeah. So let's see if it works. I mean, I have no idea if this is correct. I mean, I didn't go through it. Like I said, I was listening to you guys say it, but to me, it looks like something's working. We're getting some variability. Have to submit it to see if we totally wrote it right, but it looks like it's working. So again, that's how we're writing nested functions, like nested if statements with using other functions within the if statement to kind of handle the logic. So like I said last time, like these things can get really complex. That's about as complex as you're gonna, I don't think you'll see anything more complex than that. I think that's about as hard as it'll get. But you can see kind of how things can mix and match. All good? Questions? Mind blowing? That's what I aim for. Okay. Yes. I don't know why the task I want.
Definida ya por esta.
Just make sure to check all the task out up because it'll give you against that. All right, so this one, you just want this payment one. Can you see that? Are you able to see that? You want me to explain this one again?
No, it's fine.
It's just small. Yeah, sorry, I can make the sheet smaller. I don't know how to. I don't know how to zoom in on the whole screen. Um. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. If that's all right. All right, where were we? Okay, discount. All right, so it says calculate discount using the if function with an or function as part of the criteria argument. Return yes if either savings account. Return yes if either savings account or auto pay are listed as yes. All right, so we're gonna do the same thing. Which seems to be fun. All right, so let's try this out. So we're gonna use an if function with an or function as part of the criteria argument. Return yes if either the savings account or auto pay are listed as yes. Otherwise, return suggested auto pay. All right, so it says I'm going to use an if statement with an or function. Does anybody know? So we're going to use an or function if either savings account or auto pay are listed as yes. So I can see my savings account I know is column G, and I know auto pay is column H. Somebody tell me how I'm going to write this or function. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so G12 equals yes. Okay, so both those equal yes, or actually either one, right? All right, so you'll see one thing that we did here that I didn't bring up, or well, I went the other way on the last one, but you'll see that it works. So this Boolean actually acts as a logical test. So because it turns true, it's actually doing a logical test. So when you do these types of things, you don't actually need to put equals true. If it helps you, I do it because it helps me make sure that I have a logical test in my brain, but you can just leave this or statement just the way it is. If it's false, it doesn't pass the logical test. If it's true, it does pass the logical test. If you put an equal sign, it's fine too. Just so you know, you can do it either way. I did it the other way on the other one, but. So what I'm saying is if I did this, it's going to be the same thing. I can flip it. I can put this as false and I can flip it. So if I took that and I copied all the rest of them, it's just going to flip the logic. Okay, but again, since Boolean is basically a logic test on its own, I don't technically, I don't technically need that equals part. Yeah, you had a question?
What is the difference between if or?
The difference between, so the question really is what's the difference between and or? So we covered this last time. So remember that the difference is and is when it's checking the statements that I put in. And if all of them are true, the Boolean returns true, or if any of them are true, the Boolean returns true. So the function returns, or the function says true. So that's why in this case, it's if either savings account is yes or autopay is yes, it's going to be true. So only one of those needs to be true. If we put and, savings account and autopay would need to be true for the function to be true. Okay. All right, let's do this last one. Calculate approved. This sounds like it's going to be just a treat. All right, calculate approved. Using the if function with an and function as part of the criteria, return yes if payment okay. Oh, payment okay, score okay, and down okay are yes. Return too large if payment okay is no. Return score too low. If score too low, or score too low if score okay is no. Otherwise, return down too low. All right. Did anybody else glaze over when I read that? All right, so let's take this systematically here. So we know we're going to have, well, I think we're going to have an if statement because it says start with an if. Does anybody have a different way of doing it? We're all on board with starting with if? All right. Start with an if. Okay, so if you're reading this, where do you think I start? What do you think is the first logical test that I'm going to do here?
And?
Okay, so I'm going to start with an and because it says with an and function. So I'm going to start there. And then basically, I think I'm going to check payment, score, and down, right? To check if they equal yes. So I'll just write that real quick. This equals yes. This equals yes. This equals yes. Yep. Good. Okay. So I'm checking. I've got an and function and I'm checking to see if these three these three columns are yes. And if so, again, that's going to return true, right? So return yes. So I'm going to return yes if those things are true. So If those are true, my value of true is going to be yes. Now I've got my value if false. So now we're moving on to the next sentence. So I'm past the first sentence, and now it says return loan too large if payment okay is no, and return score too low if score okay is no. What do you guys think? What should I do here? Instead of yes, write loan too large. So it's saying return loan too large if payment okay is no. What do you mean? Yeah, so we're gonna have to type out loan too large at some point. Where we're at right now, though, is I've checked this first logical statement, right? So if this is true, all of these are yes, and I've returned yes. When I put this comma, now I'm in my value of false. So I'm what's not in the situations where I'm now analyzing where I'm building this function, all three of these are not yes. So I'm like down in one of these. Oh, not that one, but these where there's some amounts of yeses and nos. And so I've got these several other scenarios that I need to analyze in this if statement. So it looks to me, so when we read this, I need to return loan to, maybe I can write this down. Where's okay, so I'm gonna return, can you guys see this if I write here? Yeah, all right. So I'm gonna return loan too large. What's the scenario where I return this? Can you read it? Can you read me the, if PMT okay equals no. Okay, what's the next one? It says I'm gonna return score too low. What's the scenario where I return score too low? Okay, and there's one more, right? Down too low is, it says otherwise, right? Okay, so I've got four, I'm writing a statement, because we've got this first one up here that I return yes, if all three of those are correctly met. I've got three more scenarios that I'm gonna add in, that I need to analyze for. Does that make sense? So how many if statements do you guys think, how many nested if statements am I gonna need to create to analyze this?
Two.
So I've got one up there currently. How many more am I gonna need to use? Two more? Okay. How did you arrive at that? Okay, so generally the number of scenarios we're analyzing, so if you think about just a general if statement, we've got our logical statement, we've got a value of true, a value of false. So we can get two outputs per if statement. So you basically need one less if statement than the number of scenarios you're analyzing. Because you always have like a value with no or value of false. So we're gonna need to write two more if statements to add in these three additional scenarios into this. piece of code that we're writing. I see a very confused look. So keep following. Hopefully it'll come clear. So what I've got up here, right, is I've got return yes if payment if these three items are equal to yes, which is cell I12, which are these three cells that are highlighted down here, and we've got them all equal to yes. And if they're all equal to yes, we're going to print yes. Now, if they're not all equal to yes, I'm going to do a second analysis, which I can put an if statement, and I can do my second logical test, which is I can check if payment okay, let's say, is equal to no. And if it's equal to no, I can return, what am I returning? Loan too large. Okay. And if it's not, I could do another if statement where we analyze, what's the next one? If score okay equals no. And if it is, I return score too low. And if it isn't, I return down too low. Okay. I think I don't know if I got my parentheses at the end right. I might have screwed that up, but maybe it's right. I know that is like a full sentence, but does that logic make sense about how we broke down the word problem? And I'm sorry, I didn't put the first one up here, but there's one, the scenario of this is just yes. If payment, score, and what's the last one? Down equal to yes. Okay, so these are the three things that we're printing, or the four things that we're printing, and these are how we're analyzing them. And that's what that statement is doing. So hopefully if I hit enter, that one's approved because we got 3 yeses. We got loan too large. Loan too large, yes. This one says yes. So I did something. M's a yes, M's a yes. Score too large. So you can see how it's like, this one has 2 no's, right? So if we look at this line, we've got our payment okay is a no, our down okay is a no. So it kind of, the way it's analyzing it is it's analyzing it from top to bottom. So I kind of get the first thing that prints out is kind of the first argument that it runs into. It's just how Excel works. So I can't print 2 arguments, but that's what's going on. Yes. What questions can I answer? Anything? Crystal clear? Yeah. You need the actual homework that we're taking. Is it on if statements? I'll go through let's take a look, I'll take a look into the class. I'm gonna go through this section. I'll take a look at the other. talk about the game like quickly after class. All right. I'm gonna move on if there's no more questions on if statements. All good. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to start this homework and try to get through this if statement part, and then on class on Monday, I'd like to start going into this because like I said, I mean, I know this is like that's a lot, and I'm aware of it. So I'd like to put a little bit of time into it and then, get some questions when you're doing the homework. All right, so that is ifs and nested ifs. There's a couple other functions that take that if statement logic and kind of allow us to use similar functions. So got some functions called, we've got count if, we've got sum if, and we've got average if. Does anybody want to take a guess what count if does? Okay. So remember we had a count function? Does the same thing except it allows us to insert logic in. So if I just did a regular count, so let's do count here. So I'm just going to do a regular count function. So if I did a count here, whoop. So if I do count and I wanted to count, all these variables, right? I'm going to get, oh, it's counting numbers, sorry. So if I did count A, that would have worked. But if I'm doing, it's fun. So if I count these, it's going to give me back that there are 9 numbers, right? So count if, so if I did a count if, I can do something like where I'm going to check that range. And if it's greater than 8, let's say, or 9, say, so if it's greater than 9, it's going to count it. What did I do wrong? Why did my criteria not work? Let's find out what I did wrong. Oh, it just wants me to. Why is that logical function? Well, it's having me match. Okay, so I can do like a count if. Yeah, I don't know why it. So again, I'm going to select my range. I can set it equal to like, if I put 999 or something like that, it'll give me the number of items in there that are equal to 999. I'm not sure why I'm not getting a logical statement to work. I know it says criteria, but so yeah, I can put in whatever criteria I want to test that set against. Same thing with sum. So if I did a sum if, I can do my, oh man, I'm forgetting how these things work. So if I wanted to, sum if is a little bit interesting because I can select a range, I can select a criteria. So in this case, I'm going to say I want it to be small, and then I can select the sum range. I'll go over this in a second. What the heck? Oh. All right. Some of the times you forget one stupid keystroke and it totally messes everything up. So in this case, the way SUMIF worked, so I've got my range, I've got criteria and my sum range, which is in parentheses, so it's optional. I kind of did this just to show you how these functions can work. So what I'm doing with my range here in the blue, right? The blue is where I'm doing a check. So I'm checking that range against the criteria, which I put in S for this t-shirt size is small. And then the sum range is where I'm pulling the values from to sum. So I'm checking this, I'm checking to see if this column has an S. If it does, then I'm going over to this column, I'm using that value and I'm summing those values together. Does that make sense? So, like I said, this sum range is optional. I could do something different where I'm going to sum together all of the, I selected this as my sum range and I wanted to sum together all of the prices of all of the products, let's say that had a price of $7.99. I could write it like that and it would give me a sum of the prices that are $7.99. So you can do a couple different things with the sum. Again, if you're confused, clicking on that function, gives a bunch of examples and explanations on kind of how these things work. Similar thing, like average if and sum if are basically the same thing. So I can do the same thing where I'm going to take a look at this range. I'm going to check it against a criteria. Let's say checking if the size is small. Then I'm going to select the prices that I want to average. And it'll give me the average price of the items that are small. Yes. The sum if is summing the values and average is taking the average, it's taking the average of the items. So the way I wrote this formula, I'm getting, this formula is calculating the average of items that have an S. So it's taking, this $9.99, this $8.99, this $9.99, and this $8.99, and averaging them together to get $9.49. The sum is taking that $9.99, $8.99, $9.99, $8.99, and summing them together to tell you the total price of all items that are size small. Does that make sense? No? Okay. All I'm doing, so if I was to say, I want to add all the prices together of, if you look at these, right, I've got a couple different, these are all rows of products. Sorry, I didn't explain that. Each row here is one product. So it's a different SKU or stock keeper's unit. And each one of these product rows is composed of a shirt color, a shirt size, and a price. So that's a shirt, that's a shirt, that's a shirt. These are all different. They're just attributes of an item, right? So if I was to say to you, what is the average price of t-shirts that are small? What we're going to do to find that is I'm going to take all of the prices. If I take all the prices of the shirts that are small, right? So I've got 4 of them. So then put parentheses around those, and then I divided that by 4, right? I'm going to get the average of those prices. So that's what that formula is doing. It's saying, oh, you only want small? Here they are. Let me take the average of it. Or, oh, you want the sum? Let me add those together. Here you go. Is that better? Okay. Sure. So let's take a look at let's just take a look at the page here, since I obviously screwed up the input to it. Okay, that's why I screwed it up. That's fun. So it's gonna count. So what I've written here is, so I've got my range and my criteria. Those are the two things it's asking for. So I've got my range. That should be obvious, right? That's just what I've selected. Okay, the criteria that I'm putting in is like, what am I checking those values against? And then if it meets that criteria, tell me how many of them meet that criteria. So in this function that I wrote, I'm looking at this set of numbers, and if the price is equal to $9.99, it's going to tell me how many products are equal to $9.99. Okay. What I was trying to do is, you can also do something like, you can check it versus, I could say how many prices are greater than $8. And I think I put it in parentheses. Let's see if this works. Okay. So I'm not sure why I blanked on that, but if you come into this, if you come into this page, you can scroll down and it'll tell you how to do some different criteria. So I took a look at this one, and it says it counts the numbers of cells greater than 55. So that's basically what I'm doing. And it requires you to put quotations around that greater than 55. So if I come back and I look here, basically I took that range, and now I'm checking if they're greater than 8. If they're greater than 8, tell me how many are greater than 8. That's what the count function is going to do. And 6 of them are greater than 8. That's what it's telling me. Okay. Any other questions on these functions? I'm going to skip over these and move on to the lookup functions. And we'll cover them in more detail in the homework, but any other questions on these? Okay. All right, so there are two, the next kind of class of functions are called lookup functions. And what we're going to do with lookup functions is basically we're going to use one table to look up data in another table. So what I've got over here is I've got my shirts, and then I've got some information on, let's just pretend like the sales and marketing team gave us, hey, if the price is less than $7, it's, we've got really high demand. If it's $8, it's moderate. If it's $9, it's low. And if it's $10 or more, nobody wants it. All right. So for some reason, sales and marketing people, that's what they came up with, because I think that's what they get paid to do. That's a sarcastic joke, but so let's say I've got this information, and what I want to do is I want to pull the demand. I want to pull kind of these. I want to pull this information based on that pricing matrix into the specific product category. All right. So I want to look up something over here, and I want to bring it back over here. And actually, if you look in the book, the way the example case they do with the book is grades, where instead of like t-shirts, there'll be like the student name, there'll be like scores, and then there'll be like a lookup table that's like, A, B, C, D, E based on the percentage score. So this table would be the overall grading, letter grade rubric. This would be individual student scores, and we'd be matching those scores into like the individual student. So similar type use case. So what I'm going to use is there's two functions, one that's called VLOOKUP and one that's called HLOOKUP. And they're very similar. The difference is V stands for vertical, H stands for horizontal. The way to remember this is how the function indexes, okay? And I'll explain this in a minute, but the way this function is going to work is it's basically going to, so hard, I wish I was 5 feet taller. Basically, the way this function is going to work is we're going to write a function that's going to come over to this. It's going to come over to this table, and it's going to take a look at this price, and it's going to look at the first line and say, is the price below that number? Oh, it's not. And then it's going to look at this price, and it's going to say, oh, is the price below that number? It's not. It's going to move on to the next one, not onto the next one, onto the next one, until it finds a price that it breaks the threshold. Okay, and I'll show you this in a second. But so the reason we use vertical lookup is because we're going down vertical. If the data was organized the other way, such that like my prices went this way and then a row below it, my demand went that way, and we were going column by column, we would use HLOOKUP. I'll show you how this works. I mean, it'll make sense in a second, but I just want to be clear that how the data how the lookup column is designed is it kind of dictates which function we use. So the VLOOKUP, I'm going to type VLOOKUP, and then I've got my parameters, and I've got my my lookup value, which is going to be the thing in the table that, or the value that I'm looking for in my lookup table. Then I've got my table array, and here I'm just going to select this table. So this is my lookup table, so that's where I'm looking. And then the last thing we add is our column index number. And this is basically, the column index number is the column in our lookup table that we want to return into the cell we're looking, or typing this function into. So that column lookup index number is the way the function runs. It's always using column 1 as the like logical check, and then it's using, so this is always column 1, and then, you know, depending on how large this table is, this is column 2, column 3, column 4. So those column reference numbers are always this reference table could be anywhere in the chart, but from what I've selected, that's always column 1, that's always column 2. I may not have explained that great. So if this chart was down over here for some reason, this is still column 1 and this is still column 2. If it was over here, this is still column 1, this is still column 2. So column 1 is always what the function uses to check against our lookup value, and whatever other column I select then is the column that's returned. It'll get clearer when we do the homework. So if I do VLOOKUP, again, I'm going to get my lookup value. I select my table, and then my column index number is going to be 2. I close that, and I'm going to get my demands low because the price is $9.99, so it's not above $10. So it's below that $10 barrier, so it goes into low. So sorry, one thing I want to do here is, because I'm going to be copying this function down, I want to make these absolute references. And then if I pull this down, basically we can see that that's $7.99, which is below that $8. So it's in this category. That one's $8.99, which is below the $9. So it's in that category. Does that make sense what I'm doing? Can I explain it further? Where did somebody get lost? I'm sure I lost somebody. I kind of lost myself for a minute. Who's got a question? Anybody? Good? Let me do something else here then. Let's put our shirt size here. We'll have do something like this. Okay, so I want to redo this, but I want to all right, I want to redo this, but I want to do it for I want to redo it, but I want to look at it based on shirt size. So I want to write. Sorry, let's just do this for right now. All right, so I want to write a VLOOKUP command. And I want to write it. I'm going to look at search size. So the lookup value that I'm going to look up in my table compared to the other table is shirt size. So can somebody tell me what's the table that I should select? I want to return demand, and it's going to be based on shirt size. So what's the table that I want to select? I'll tell you that. So that's the lookup value that I'm going to use. What's the table? What's the table array that I should select for my lookup table? In the lookup table is where I'm looking up. It's the information I'm comparing to then the one I'm working with. Give me the upper left cell. I-12 to where? 14. All right, so that's my table array. That's the table I'm going to look at. Now I want to return demand. What column index number do I want to use? 3, 2, 3, 3. So I want to use 3 because first column is always the comparison column. Second column I'm not going to use in this one. Third column is what I'm going to return. So it's column 3. So I use column 3 and I return that the demand is low. I have no idea why I returned that. I actually think I know. Let's see. Yeah, okay, so that I didn't think it was going to do it on this one, but it did it. So I'll talk about it. Okay, so that was right. But you can see that for some reason, when I type this, right, it says low, but we look down here and it's like, we know it should be here. So something's wrong. And what you can see is that there's actually this lookup, there's this not necessary range lookup value that we can add. And if I put a comma here, you'll see that it tells me a little bit about this. And it's saying that when it's true, when that value is true, it's an approximate match. And when it's false, it's an exact match. Excel defaults this to true. What that means, and I actually have a better example here of what it'll explain it. But basically for like text and things like that. Like Excel will use some sort of algorithm, I have no idea what, to kind of approximately match things. So let's say I was looking up salespeople's names or something, or student names even, and I've gotten Andy and an Andrew. An exact match would find Andy. If I was looking for Andy, an exact match would find Andy, but not Andrew, and an approximate match would find Andy and Andrew and group them together. So if you want to be super specific on what you're looking for, we use the exact match. If we want to bundle things and let Excel kind of use some magic, we use approximate. But for this one, if I type false and use an exact match, it'll return the correct item. I'll show you this a little bit better when we use shirt colors. So you can see that this one, I have navy blue, and we'll do that in 1 second. But outside of that last piece of logic right there, does this make sense for our lookup value, our table array, and our column index? Does everybody follow how we did that? Yeah. Okay, so let's do one more then here where we put color. We'll put red. We'll put white. Whoops. We'll put blue. We'll put navy blue. Oh, I just gotta use blue. And what's my other color? I guess that's it, right? Yeah. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna select my color this time. I'm gonna select this as my lookup table. My column that I return is going to be column 4 this time. And this time I'm going to do, we'll do an exact match first. So again, I'm going to make this an absolute reference. I don't know what I screwed up. What did it say I screwed up? Let's see. Oh. All right, got to put the function name. All right, so we'll see that red is hot. And so if we pull this down, so we'll see that what were we using? We were using for some reason, it hates the blues. Got no idea why it hates all the blues. It doesn't like my blue. Oh, I might need to. So if I use a. All right, so when I'm using this, so again, this last variable is this approximate versus exact. So when I use an exact match, you'll see that the navy blue one doesn't find a match over here. So that's why it's showing NA, because it doesn't see a match. Now what it should, if I change this to, so now it's seeing an exact match on navy blue, but not on these other blues. If I use an approximate match, which would be true, it should find my color. I don't know why that's happening. So yeah, and I'm not going to troubleshoot it right now because we're running out of time. All right, I'll cover the exact approximate match next class. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. But I'm going to run out of time if we try to fix it here. So yeah, so if you can, I guess for next class, try to take a stab at least getting through the if functions on the homework, and we'll try to review them, and I'll go into this in a little more depth. Thanks.